Hello and welcome to the Simple Joys podcast with me, your host, Joe Wald. What are we doing here? I want to thank you for being here and for welcoming me into your ear holes. This is a project that's been a long time in the making, at least in my brain. And while a podcast is pretty easy to make, it's not exactly like building a rocket or teaching a moose to ski or a mole rat to love. Anyone can make one, and indeed everyone has. But this is an idea that's taken quite a lot to get from conception to completion. And before you commit to the next 45 minutes, I thought it was right that maybe you should hear what that idea is. The urge to do this came to me, as all good urges do, at the top of a hill. I was in Armenia hiking the Transcaucasian Trail. The Transcaucasian Trail in Armenia is a walking trail that goes from the top left to the bottom right of the country. It's about 830 kilometers long. It's split into 8 sections that connect significant cities or towns, and there's not much civilization in between. Armenia is super mountainous and has loads of big hills and wide open spaces, and it's not at all densely populated. Almost half the population lives in the capital. So I had a lot of time by myself. I'd never done a hike before. The longest walk I'd ever done was 5 days and 80 kilometers, and that was the week before I'd set off for Armenia. So it was a bit of a random thing to do, and I didn't plan to do the whole thing. I'd just done a bit of hiking in the months before and enjoyed it, and I just quit my job, so I had some time to spare. It was early September. I was about 3 weeks in and completely on my own. I'd expected to meet some other hikers on the way, but it seemed like most of them had packed it in for the season. So I'd had 3 weeks entirely alone. Every day I would wake up in my tent, pack it away and set off along a line on a map through huge fields, valleys, up hills, across rivers, through forests, past the odd village, beside shepherds with big dogs that shout at you and threaten to bite your legs off as you pass. The dogs, not the shepherds. I've met loads of people on my way, and at the risk of sounding a little bit gap-yar, I'd experienced the most unbelievable kindness ever. Farmers would offer me food everywhere I went. Shepherds would give me nuts and offer to host me for the night in their hut. Families who travelled en masse to eat and drink at big picnic tables beside rivers would invite me in and treat me like an honoured guest. I'd never understood really why they did it, and I'd never seen anything like it. I was going to bed at 9 p.m. every night, waking up at 6, reading loads, daydreaming a lot, talking to myself as I walked, just simply walking with a 20 kilo pack on my back that contained everything I owned and everything I needed to survive. There were moments where I was lonely, frustrated, cold, even angry. There's something completely mad about a man on his own with no one around for miles, absolutely furious. But I was. I felt all my emotions really strongly and often in very quick succession. I had nothing to temper them, nothing to distract from them. So I just sat with them and felt them. And kind of for the first time, I fully experienced what it was like to have my mind. And what amazed me more than anything was the capacity that I had for joy. Pure joy that didn't seem to have a cause. I'd get to the top of a hill and feel like I could do a knee slide. It's quite hard to describe. I suppose it's probably something to do with the combination of exercise and fresh air and nice views and having a simple, straightforward objective, which I could do without time pressure really and with very little to distract me. But I found that so often when I'm at home in London, I need fuel for my joy. I need nice food or a beer or nice clothes or other people to make me happy. But this felt like joy from nothing. Joy that costs nothing. Joy that's potentially bottomless. It felt like renewable joy. I don't know. It doesn't require anything. It's not needy. It's not complicated. It's simple. A simple joy. And so, of course, I had my moment of clarity. Surely the happy person's objective in life is to collect as many of these simple joys as possible and fill their life with them. At a time when I was doing quite a lot of soul searching and not really sure where I was going, this felt like a bit of a breakthrough. And I wasn't sure how I was going to make money to live and what I should spend my time doing with my life, but I felt like I can't really go wrong if I put simple joys at the centre. And then I decided I wanted to ask other people what their simple joys were. And that was really good. I was exploring the idea a lot in my own mind, and so I really liked talking about it and getting different perspectives on it. And it often gave me a bit of inspiration for where I could look for my own joys. And perhaps more than anything, I felt like the people I was talking to enjoyed those conversations, because quite often it wasn't something they'd thought about much before, or at least not in those terms. And I think they benefited from the opportunity for a bit of self-reflection. And then, of course, like any self-respecting man who spends 2 straight months with his own thoughts and no one to tell him he's an idiot, I decided that this whole spiel was worth recording and publishing online for the satisfaction of the listening public. So here you are, you filthy animals. And what a first episode we've got in store. My first guest is Alex Bullivant. Alex felt like the perfect person to talk to try and get this idea off the ground. Alex and I met in Armenia. I'd intended to meet him on the very first day of my hike, in fact. I was on a group chat with a few thousand people who had done or wanted to do the Transcaucasian Trail, and I put a message on there asking if anyone was about to set off, who I could maybe join up with. Alex replied to my message saying that he would be starting that weekend and that I could meet him at the starting point if I wanted to. I was hitchhiking there from Georgia, so I didn't know exactly when I'd make it there, and in the end I missed him by about 8 hours. I texted him. I said, "I'll catch you up." He replied, "Sure, hope so." The slimy little bastard didn't think to mention at the time that he was trying for the FKT, the fastest known time on the Transcaucasian Trail in Armenia, and needless to say, I did not catch him. I kept up with him on WhatsApp though, and when I heard from him that he'd finished, I was about a third of the way through, by the way, I was fascinated to meet him. I paused my walk and hitchhiked to Yerevan, where I met him for the first time. I was literally gasping to talk to him. Conversationally, I was like a dried up sponge, and the opportunity to talk to someone, anyone really, but someone who had just been through exactly what I was going through and exactly what I was going to go through, albeit a lot quicker, was so exciting. And it was a chance to quiz an expert and understand all the ways in which I was making my life harder for myself because I know nothing about this, and get all his advice. And Alex turned out to be even more fascinating than I expected. Dr. Alex Bullivant is a multi-published theoretical physicist who also happens to run ultramarathons. His record in Armenia was his second FKT, his first being on the Peak District Boundary Way. And he's done some mental things, including hiking/running the Te Araroa in New Zealand, which is a 3,000-kilometre trail that traces the full length of the country. He's done the Spine Race, which is a midwinter ultramarathon on the Pennine Way that tends to take somewhere between 3 and 6 days. He's a machine, and he's a deep thinker. A hugely impressive individual who, when I met him, had one pair of functional underwear in the whole country. He's a believer in the importance of adventure, and I figured that when it comes to simple joys, he'd probably have some stuff to say. So without further ado, please enjoy this episode, the first ever episode of the Simple Joys podcast. Massive.
Unreal.
Unreal.
You sound like Mr. Squirrel.
I need to get my. I feel like even for my 2-3 days in the north, I'm starting to get there. Starting to shorten my A's a little bit.
Ooh.
I need to. You can't
Becoming a man.
You're quite. You can't give it away when you're southern. You can't give it away.
No.
And,
not if you want respect.
Yeah, and it's the same. I mean, growing up in South London, you get this sort of. You can't give away being middle class. You can't give that away. Words like, I can't say garage.
Yeah,
Finished.
It's also this kind of thing of like, when you're up north, you have to think like, what do I sound like to a northerner? And so someone from South London, they say bonjour. Je m'appelle.
Is that You sound like a Frenchman to it. Yeah. Oh God, I mean that is the worry, isn't it? I think you kind of, you just got to smile and wave as a southerner. Anyway, so I've cycled up here on my bike to see you and to exchange some of our goods that we shared in Armenia. If I could make that sound any more suspicious.
Yeah. It was a lovely time.
It was a great time. And yeah, so I haven't seen you since I took my bag over to your room in Yerevan in Armenia and basically asked you to look through my stuff and tell me what I didn't need because my bag was massively, massively heavy. And at that point, you had just finished a record time for the TCT in Armenia, an incredible 20 days, 7 hours and 11 minutes?
I think so. It's been a month or so. And I've been trying to forget about it.
Yeah, well, exactly. So that was a distance of 830 kilometers. And talk me through what your strategy was going into that.
So the way that I played it is actually I hadn't done a lot of hiking beforehand. I guess like I'd been doing a lot of running up until the Spine race in January of last year. And then I was just a bit burnt out. I'd been out on the moors through the winter training. And so I had a period where I really didn't do much. I wasn't running too much. I wasn't hiking too much. And so what I did is 2 weeks before Armenia, I went and did the Pennine Way. Yeah. Pretty fat, like in a kind of fast pace.
The whole thing?
I did 190 miles of the Pennine Way, which is
hiking,
just short.
not running.
Hiking, but just doing big long days.
Yeah,
just doing kind of like 30 odd miles a day.
Yeah.
Just to like get some churn in my legs, make sure that I was trying a new pair of shoes and just all these things, just making sure that everything felt smooth. And I did it and I was just in good nick. Like I wasn't having any issues with my legs. Like everything was feeling pretty cruisy. So I had a week off, drank some beer, chilled out. And I went to Armenia and I just knew that I was in all right shape.
Yeah.
My plan is that on a distance like that, it's far enough that you can burn yourself out. And so I didn't want to go too crazy. And so I just kind of had it in my head of like, if I can just do 25 miles a day-ish, I can go for around 20 days. My original goal was to go about 19 days.
Right.
But I think if I was going to do that, in hindsight, I would go back and I feel like I could do a much better time.
Really?
Part of what happened is I thought, let's do 25 miles a day. And I didn't know much about the logistics. I'd read a few of the write-ups.
Yeah.
And people have been kind of vague. And so I just really didn't know what I was going into. So actually I was well overpacked. I had like very nice ultralight gear, but I had gear for all eventualities. I was expecting there to be desert and snow. And so I had a set of kit that meant that no matter what happened, I was never going to be uncomfortable. Right. It still wasn't heavy, but it was a bomber kit that I could do any scenario. And actually, I wasn't tested in that many different ways. Like there was a bit of hail, but it was never too cold. And if it was cold enough for a short period that I could have just kind of shivered it out without it being too much of a problem. And so I think if I'd had different gear, I could have gone faster and done a quicker time. But for the amount of gear I carried, I think there were some days where I only did 20 miles, or some days where I did kind of 50K, like 30 odd miles. And the heat was the big problem for me.
Which is a difference between our experiences, because I was about a month behind you and it had cooled down quite a lot by that point. And my issue was the cold much more than the heat, particularly because most of it was above 2,000 meters. But for you, the priority was never really comfort. Would you say that you were actually trying to sort of put yourself into sort of verging on discomfort?
I don't know. I was pretty comfy I think I was too comfy.
Really?
I think the time would have been better if I'd been more uncomfortable. And if I was going to do it again, I would go more in the uncomfortable.
So you'd take, half the amount of stuff that you took?
Yeah. I would also change the season that I went.
Yeah.
So I think we were late in the season. Like it was like August, September. I think I would go earlier in the year so there's more water. So it appears to me that Armenia, the whole watershed is based on there being snowfall in the winter. Yeah. And all the rivers are fed from snow melt for the rest of the year. So going later in the summer, it is warm. And that was definitely, I'm a Northern English guy. The last stuff I was doing was like winter ultramarathons.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing this year. That's what I know about. Armenia was a different kettle of fish to that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the rivers were running dry as well. And water is heavy, right? It's a kilo a liter. And so if you're doing long water carries, that's, if you've got a nice ultralight tent that probably only weighs 500 grams. And so a liter of water is twice what your tent is.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? The sleeping bag is the same as a 500 ml bottle.
Yeah.
And you can cane one of those in no time at all. And so this is the kind of these are some of the considerations.
What was your system with water carrying?
So I was using the app Far Out.
Yeah.
And Far Out is a paid app. It's really good if you're doing like the Tiaroa in New Zealand or the PCT in the US, because there's so many people. It has a map of the route. And what is good about it is it has comments. So other hikers will put comments about the state of water flow. And when you're on a busy trail, you can have 24 hours ago, someone says this river is in good nick.
Yeah.
It's going to be in good nick today, right? In Armenia, I was kind of there was a few comments, but, so it might have been last year, 2 years ago, someone says, this was flowing here. And so you've always got a bit of a gamble. And there were times where I did gamble it and it paid off. Is there going to be water here or not? There were times where it says this stream is flowing. You get there and it's some muddy hellhole, and all it's really going to do is bung up your water purifier, right?
Yeah.
There was a time where I had to dig a river, I didn't have a lot of water, and so I dug the trickle, and there was a bit more in the ground than there was on the surface. But water was a constant. Whenever you do one of these hikes, water is always on the front of your mind. But if you're high up at the end of the season in snow melt, the snow melt is gone, but the rivers are fed. It really does play on your mind
for sure. And when you're digging to get to groundwater, are you thirsty at that point, or are you doing it because you feel like you should?
So it can be both, right? So often you're a little bit thirsty, but usually I wouldn't have got myself, ideally I wouldn't have got myself into being massively in thirst at that point.
Yeah.
But it's knowing that I've got 10, 15 miles to then another questionable water source, right?
Yeah.
The question is always I want to carry the minimum amount of water to get to the next spot, but also I need some degree of contingency. Yeah. And so you're always balancing the two. The other calculation that people don't think enough about is that a lot of the food I was eating was dehydrated. Mm-hmm. Right? I had my emergency food at the bottom of my bag was dehydrated meals that I never really ate, but they were always there for an emergency. But I was eating a lot of noodles and things my main diet was kind of noodles and salami and variations of this. And so, if you don't have any water, you don't have any noodles, right? It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And so even where you can camp, right? So as you're getting towards the end of the day, you need to stock up more water to get you through the night and get you going in the morning and have enough for dinner and have enough for breakfast. And so this soon adds up to how much water you need.
Yeah.
And there are times where you have to slog it on because there's no water, right? You might have to walk quite far into the night. And walking in the night, I think, is an interesting thing about the record or doing the FKT in Armenia. And I think this is in my write-up. But I knew it was going to be warm, and I had my original strategy was going to be to walk into the night quite commonly. This is not...
It's just mental to me. I would have struggled with that so much. I didn't. Yeah.
This, on the Pennine Way, this is pretty common practice for me. Also, it's not... Especially, I train a lot running with head torches and stuff. It's not out of my norm. But Armenia was ridiculous for walking to the night because the wildlife came out.
Yeah.
And so I remember
and the wildlife is, well, it's it's bears.
Yeah, this is and the bears didn't come out in the day.
Yeah.
Well, but they were around at night. If you were in the woods and stuff, it's kind of like seeing your ex-girlfriend, right? You both see each other. And then there's this kind of awkward, you both try and pretend that you didn't see each other. And you turn around and slowly walk off. Because they're not like the bears in North America. They were definitely afraid of you.
Oh, that's so funny.
But as well as the bears, what could be as scary is the porcupines. Because the porcupines just crash around in the grass.
Really?
I can't believe how much noise they make. Real carefree little critters, right? And so you're walking along and you hear all this noise and you think the only thing that can make that much noise is a bear.
Yeah, but
and you're like, but I can't see it.
What sort of noise? What are they? the sound they make on the floor, or the sound
the way because you had like tall grass. There would often be like quite tall grass, even in the woodlands, and it was quite dry because of the time of year, so it did make a bit of a crackling sound.
Yeah,
and just the porcupines moving through it, and like they just didn't seem to care about like. Some of the jackals were quite silent, right? They would howl
until they weren't. Yeah,
they would howl at night, but they wouldn't like crash through the forest.
No.
Like, you could kind of tell that they were there in the distance, but you never heard them actually, like, step on a twig or something.
Yeah.
Whereas the porcupines just... You're like, bloody hell, man. Like,
I'll tell you what always gave me a fright was the flocks of... Was it swallows or, like, the little birds? Do you remember? You'd walk towards, like, a little bush, and then 3 meters in front of you, this, like 40 birds would just take off, and you'd be, oh my god, it's a loud sound when they it was that always, I was sort of jump out of my skin.
And I guess I was in British Columbia not that long ago, and in British Columbia they had like, they call it the green gold rush, right? They cut down all of the native forests for lumber, and they replanted spruce and things. And if you go out hiking in there, like, you know, there's some beautiful forests, but a lot of them have like a very dead ground floor, basically, where, you know, the non-native trees, like, they're hard to get through because the trees are really close together and stuff. And you get it here, you know, the plantations up in Kielder Forest and things like that, and some of the Scottish plantations. But I could not believe the health of the forest in Armenia. Like, the trees, you could almost drive a car through them. But then they had like spiky hedges, like, and you had all this different layers of like life living in the forest. Yeah, that was just beautiful. You know, it was very Brothers Grimm. Right? You really felt like you were in a bit of a fairy tale.
Particularly the people as well, which I don't want to get onto. But the encounters, you probably meet a shepherd once or twice a day, and it just seemed genuinely like they lived, either sort of long time in the past or in a fairy tale.
I think the one thing I found interesting was, so I was reading the trail notes and some of the people that had walked the trail, and people would often make comments about like, everywhere you meet these herders, they're always, I think there is a kind of history of these old Silk Road places of welcoming travelers.
Yeah.
And so you'll be walking along and someone will be like, coffee, right? And so you end up sat there and you go into these like very minimal huts, and you're drinking coffee, and then the vodka comes out, and there's 2 kids playing FIFA on their like brand new smartphones, right? While you're drinking vodka, and then like, oh, I've got a cigarette, and I'm like, I'm all right.
Yeah.
And all of it, and they're like, you know, they're desperate to feed you, and it's just, you know, a little bit out of curiosity, a little bit out of boredom, and a lot out of kindness. But I do remember in some of the notes and some of the write-ups that I'd read, people had made these kind of comments of like, oh, you know, maybe you shouldn't accept the food off the herders because they haven't got a lot. And I think that naively I was expecting them to be, you know, there would be a naivety, they wouldn't. But actually what I really saw was people really thriving out in the mountains. They had lots and lots of meat, and they had like, were really enjoying like making their own cheeses with like local spinach mixed in. And they had a plethora of, you know, a lot of them were quite over, like, you know, weren't emaciated and they were desperate to share what they had, but they weren't in scarce supply. And I thought that was kind of like, these are people who really knew how to work the land.
Absolutely.
And it was really beautiful to see. Like,
and they've got, as you say, they've got what they need in abundance. And I remember like 2 or 3 days in, I had this exact same experience, was asked, sort of 2 boys on a horse came up behind me and shouted coffee. And I was like, I walked on initially, and then I came back. I was like, actually, that could be interesting. And I came back, and after a bit of sort of some confusion, a man led me into his little house, and we had a massive lunch together. And he ended up giving me about 2.5 kilos of cheese. It's just massive blocks of cheese. And you can't really say no, so I put them in my bag, and I carried on with them. And my bag was already way too heavy, and it was ridiculous. And so I got to the next village, and I was I didn't want to just throw this cheese away. And so I was asking people, do you want some cheese? Like, can I give you some cheese? And they were all like, what do you mean? I've got a cow. And so they've got what they need. And I completely agree that the kindness that they show isn't, they don't give more than they can afford to give. And I think it's a sort of demeaning thing to suggest that they do. it was really nice. And I'm interested to know, because you've done many more adventures like this in the UK than I have. This is kind of my first cycling up here. And I'm interested to know what the hospitality is like here. How does that differ?
So what I find is there's a big gulf between people's idea of what the hospitality we were like and what it is like. So I know a range of people, and they tell all these stories, and they kind of like, there's a group of people that I know very well, and what they do is they save all their money, and they don't really go out a lot, and they go to Southeast Asia, for instance, right, on their holiday, and they go on this like 1 month holiday per year, and they make a big deal. It's a big thing in their life. And they go out there and they say, oh, I see all this kindness, I see all of this, and they see all of these nice things in the world that they don't see back home. And I found that some of the best adventures I find and the best hospitality happens right around the corner. Like, so I really love long distance hiking. I do like traveling, but I also do love just walking out of the front door, and like I don't feel like it doesn't require a plane ride for me to go on an adventure.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important idea for everyone. And part of this is that like I really love pub culture. Like I grew up in my teens and stuff hanging out in pubs, and I like this kind of storytelling, this traditional English storytelling. You have a few pints of like bitter, I tell you a story, you tell me that, and there's a bit of a one-upsmanship to it. And I find that this comes back to my like long distance hiking kind of story, because informed by my long distance hiking, what I see is that there's lots of little villages where people have this beautiful combination of kindness and a little bit of boredom, right? And this isn't to criticize them, but actually it's what makes it quite interesting. So you walk into town, you're a bit of a novelty, right? You've got your little backpack on. You're not in a car or anything. Like you've put yourself out there. So people make an assumption about you that you're probably not a bad guy. You've got there's something interesting about you.
You've got some stories to tell.
All right. So you sit down in the pub. They ask you, you spin them a yarn about what you've been doing today. They have a chuckle. They spin you a yarn. And then 10 minutes later, they're like, oh, my wife's got stew on. Come and stay at my house. Like, and I just, everywhere I've been in the UK, this happens. Like, in a way that everyone says is not happening.
Yeah.
And there's always the joke of like, it's a good job you arrived in our village, not the next one over, because they're all sheep shaggers. Or, you're always lucky that you found that one. And then you go to the next village and they're kind as anything. They're like, oh, I can't believe you had an all right night in the last pub, right? But just people are always desperate. If the pub stopped serving food, often people just be like, oh, here's some sandwich, here's some spare bread, and people just couldn't be happier to help, and they want to be a little bit involved in your story. And just, for instance, I even just a classic example of this was when I was doing the Spine trade. Like the Spine is a race along the Pennine Way in winter. I was doing the training about this time last year, so this would be like December last year. And I was running along the Pennine Way, and I got to a place called Gargrave. There's not a lot of train stations on the Pennine Way, and so it's a good place to exit, right? So I'd done my sections. Went to get the train. Trains were all cancelled. All right, great. The weather was horrendous. I had a tent, but I wasn't desperate to camp. So I was like, right, I'll go to the pub and see if someone will give me a lift to Leeds. It's where it is you're close to Malham and things, so it's. You're in this range of a lot of people and the train goes to Leeds, where you're in a range of where a lot of people would go for a day out around in this part of the Yorkshire Dales, go out for dinner and go back to Leeds. And so I was a bit like, oh, I bet if I go in and say hello, someone will give me a lift. So I walked into the pub and I ordered a pint and I sit down and I was like, I get chatting to someone. I was like, oh, there's no one going back to Leeds today. And the bar guy overhears this and was like, I'm taking my wife out for a curry in Bradford in an hour's time. Yeah. He's like, I know the trains have been cancelled. Like, there's no sweat. Like, here, have some chips. Like, have a pint, relax, and we'll drop you off at the station in Bradford. Like, perfect. Yeah. So I get in the car. Doesn't even drop me off in Bradford. Drops me off in Keighley. I end up getting home quicker than if I'd got the original train that I was aiming for. Yeah. And this stuff is just going on all day, like the unsung heroes of the country. Like there's just people are exerting this kindness left, right, and centre. Yeah. And how much do you think the fact that you've grown up here in sort of near the Peak District, near the sort of in the hills, effectively, how much has that influenced the way that you want to sort of go on these adventures? Yeah, I think So my great granddad was at the Mass Trespass, which
Mm-hmm.
is the kind of starting point of the national park, the Peak District National Park.
Yeah.
And he was an early walker of the Pennine Way. My granddad was a big hiker, and I definitely grew up with an idea that like hiking is a pastime. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something you would do, right?
Yeah.
A lot of our childhood would go. We did a lot of kayaking and we did a lot of walking. And then a Sunday afternoon will be go for a walk in the Peak District, go for a pub lunch, and come home. Right? And I grew up in a context where that was, that was leisure time. Right?
Yeah.
And so I do sometimes joke to myself that I don't really know what else I would be doing because I wasn't just hiking in the woods. Like maybe I need to be. I do some other sports. I do some other things. But for me, there is a kind of like a feeling of like this is the classic like English leisure time.
But it's progressed from that, hasn't it?
It has got a little bit dafter. So I used to do skateboarding and did a lot of slacklining stuff, which is like tightrope walking kind of thing. So I was heavily involved in that kind of stuff. And then what happened is that and if you want to do climbing, or there's lots of other sports where you kind of need other people to do it. And so when I was in my like early 20s, it was easy to make a call at the like 9 a.m. with like no real idea, and a bunch of people would turn up, and you could go do some crazy extreme sports.
Yeah,
like, it was very simple. And then as you get older, a lot of people aren't desperate to get hurt. A lot of people have got nice girlfriends or like partners of some context.
And some people aren't bothered at all.
Some people don't grow up. And so I ended up kind of getting upset that a lot of the sports I wanted to do, I was just struggling to get a big enough crew to do safety lines, and it became more about
hanging out with 14-year-olds a lot.
You do end up being the older guy. and so I started doing more hiking because I could do it on my own. And then the more I was hiking on my own, I just started getting a bit quicker and a bit quicker. And I really loved being out in the mountains on my own. And then I was doing bigger and bigger distances initially, and then once you kind of time constraints, how long can you step out of reality dictates how long you can go. So I started being quicker with it, doing bigger mileage or running, and that allowed me to do bigger trails in shorter periods, and I can come back, do regular life, and then I can go out again. And that's kind of how I ended up in this nonsense. Like,
is normal life an important kind of? It's important that you come out of it and then go. You can go out and come back, and go out and come back. Is that an important part of it?
I guess. So in most of my 20s, I was always doing academia of some sense. Like I was doing a PhD or postdoctoral work, and that was a big important part of my life. Like I really loved that kind of work. And what happened is I had projects, and so another thing that led me down this route was that I wouldn't really book annual leave like a normal person would in a job, because there is no, in theory there is in academia, but there isn't. And so what I did quite like is that I would just, as soon as a project, everything had quietened down, there's no conference, there's no project, then I would just disappear the next day and go do a couple of 100 miles on trail, and then I'd come back and go back to work. And also with trails, like, it's beautiful to get out there, but if you've been out for 2 weeks, like you are a bit ready for a real shower and eat real food. Like and you do come back, and you come back with a bit of an afterglow. Like everything has a little bit more of a sparkle. Yeah. There's something about going on these trips that I love, which is that the mundanity of life suddenly becomes exciting again, right? Like eating a like a tin of fish and some noodles, right? Is not really that exciting to me when I'm back at my house, right?
Well, quite, yeah.
But when I'm in the mountains of Armenia, like this is like ecstasy. Like it feels so beautiful. Like,
well, this is brilliant because it's exactly that's inspired this podcast, because it's the mundane things that give you that kind of disproportionate amount of joy. What sort of within that, what would you say are the sort of simple joys that are associated with this, with hiking and adventuring for you?
For me, I really love the one foot in front of the other. Yeah. There's a simplicity to life that you don't get in any other context. You have to get up in the morning and get your miles done, right? You have to consume some calories and drink some water and find somewhere half decent to camp, right? That's it for the day. Yeah. There is no other structure. Yeah. Well, those are heavy constraints, but there's no other structure. And so you just kind of and you get up with the sun and you go to bed with the sunset, and you feel this ebb and flow of life, right? I've never really been one to follow routine, but it's somehow the nature dictates this routine, and even though you are in this routine of getting up, go to bed, getting up, go to bed, every day is different. You see the world evolve in front of you, right? It's at a very human scale, ironically. The UK is amazing for hiking because actually, for how small it is, the geology changes very quickly, right? Compared to maybe the US or something.
Yeah.
So if you walk like 30 miles in the UK, the geology will change. You'll go from limestone into grit. Right?
Yeah.
And there's something about just seeing it. You see the trees change slightly on the edges, and then all of a sudden you're definitely in a new national park.
Yeah.
And I really love this like slow evolution, like under your feet. Like,
Yeah.
I never really got this from cycling so much. I've done a little when I was much younger. I did some cycle packing, and like I guess you were always on the road, and it just felt like you were going from town to your marker is like village to village, right? Whereas on these, this kind of personal distance, especially in the UK, just feels like it's you're going from geology to geology, or like from landscape to landscape, and you just see it slowly changing, and there's more of a novelty to seeing a village.
Well, quite. And these are things that I guess you probably wouldn't notice if you were going about daily life, which has so much other crap involved in it.
Yeah, like Tolkien, when he was writing his, when Tolkien was talking about fantasy writing. I'm not a big fantasy reader, but I thought he had some interesting things. I think he calls it the principle of restoration. And roughly, he definitely writes about, in fantasy, you wrap up your story in fantastical world, big forests and elves and gold, But actually, at the end of the day, the stories you tell are actually just about the humanistic qualities, right? It's about friendship. It's about human relationships.
Yeah.
And his idea was that this kind of high elf, aesthetic blending is all really just there to make us surprised again about our own humanity.
Yeah.
It reminds us that actually life is really built on this kind of like human interactions. And I think that's what the hiking thing does for me is, you walk out of the door and you feel like you're going on an adventure. You put your hat on, you put your rucksack on, and all of a sudden, like, it's not that you're a different person, but all of a sudden this like little stream that you walk past many times suddenly has a little bit more of a sparkle than it does when you're walking on your way to work, right? There's something about your mindset that shifts. And I tried to bring that back you do bring it back into your daily life, like to some extent, but it's never quite as sparkly as it is when you feel like you're on your trip. Like,
do you have any actual techniques? Because I'm struggling now, having come back from Armenia, 2 months there. I felt very different at the end of that, and I thought I was looking at the world in a different way. And exactly as you said, and as I thought would happen, I came back, and initially I tried to actually carry it back into life in the UK, and when I came back I stayed at my brother's on the other side of London, and then the next day I walked home just with I still had my bag on my back, and I just thought, why not? Because it made me feel like I could transfer the things that I was doing in Armenia are not Armenia specific, and the way that I felt was something I wanted to hang on to. It has faded inevitably. Do you have any techniques for trying to make it kind of to remember?
Yeah, I think, yes. We have attempted this, right? Like going on the big grand adventures, right, is always its own thing, right? But I do think that, like, you cycling from London up to us, we're in Doncaster now, right? So that's probably like 300 miles. I think, like, the thing to remember is that it's not about the big grand adventures. Doing like 2 days on the Pennine Way across the Peak District, right, has a lot of that. And you don't need to like save up for months on end to go and facilitate these, right? Where you live like the North Downs Way, like a friend of mine set the record for the North Downs Way recently, right? It was on his doorstep, right? I've never done the North Downs Way because it's far from, but there's this route, he'd never really done it. He went and set the FKT, and there's that titillation of like, there were all these mini adventures to be had around. I've never read his book, but I know that Alistair Humphreys talks about this notion of microadventures. Like, what do you do from 5 to 9? Go bivvy on a hill, right?
Yeah.
There's some kind of joy to be had with these silly little like pointless endeavors.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something I try and do a lot of. I've never had a lot of money, and you don't always have a lot of time. And so there isn't a possibility for this. I've got all my, now you've done Armenia, you've got all the hiking kit you need, right? You've got the space. So the barrier to entry for buying equipment is over, right? Now the thing is it's a shame to have that equipment and only use it once a year, which is what many people do. And if you are looking for this after, what I like to do is like I'm a member of the Long Distance Walkers Association, the LDWA. And like on their website, they just have a list of like long distance walks, right? And they range from kind of 50 miles to, 5,000 miles. But they have this collection they have the GPX files, which is like what you load into a GPS device to follow the route. And you can just go through, you can search area, distance, whether it's linear or closed.
Yeah.
They've got all these search options. And so if I'm looking for a mini adventure, I just go on there, find, 60-mile route, takes me 2 days. I just go and have a lovely time, have a nice pub meal halfway.
Yeah.
And being wet and cold makes me appreciate the taste of the coffee in a way that I just don't. And then you're like feeling a bit low, like just like some instant coffee, without even using boiling water, just feels amazing. Like, and I've craved that feeling. Like it's the ebb and flow of life. Like it's one thing that I like about this hiking thing is this contrast, right? You feel this in this ebb and flow of life. You feel the lowest of lows next to the highest of highs. And it feels like you're kind of like living life. I once had this idea about people say, when you have a bad breakup, right? People say, oh, time is the healer. And I understand what they mean, but I think that actually time here is the metaphor, right? It's not the actual time as in you need 6 months, 4 days, 3 hours, right? That's not what they mean by time. What they mean by time is the spectrum of experience, right? And so you can condense that spectrum of experience by going on these adventures, right? When you feel the lowest of lows next to the highest of highs, and you do that a few days in a row, it feels like time has passed in a way that, if you've just done 6 days of monotony going to work, right? You might not have had those experiences. You might not feel as positive about life, right? There's something about the compression of life into these things that I also find really beautiful.
I love that. And it feels like you're kind of, you realize how trivial things are when you get out of it, and kind of when you realize one low, you zoom out, I guess, and you see that it is just this sort of undulating kind of, that life is just sort of ups and downs in succession. And I think, and it is a kind of, it's like you can do that in a sort of padded way that's kind of not dangerous, and you're not putting yourself at risk. You're just sort of, you're just experiencing what life is like. It's lovely. I'm interested, do you feel like other people understand that when you explain it to them?
That's a good question. I've definitely heard people say they understand. But I think also, talk is cheap. Like it's kind of like a lot of people talk about the benefits they get from therapy, or many different avenues. Mm-hmm. Like people have talked to me about the benefits they've had of therapy. I've never tried therapy, but I do think that one of the reasons these things are less interesting ideas for me is because of what I've learned about myself from doing these kind of adventures, and these kind of trips. Like when you're in the lowest of lows, you never just think like, oh, I hate my ex, or like this person who wronged me, like F them, right? Yeah. Those ththings don't cross your mind. If anything, when you're in the lowest of lows and you think about the people that wronged you, you actually just forgive them. Mm-hmm. It's hard, because I some people call it struggle. We were kind of joking about this yesterday, but I would call it strife. There are certain sections that you have to overcome something, right? It's not really it's not suffering. But there are elements that could be described as that. It's never that bad, but there is something to overcome, and overcoming these things never makes you reflect negatively on the people around you. You always go like, "Oh, it just doesn't matter. I've done this now. Like, I don't care." Yeah. In a way that if you just sat around in the pub like wallowing, right, then you might be like, "Oh, that person's a twat," and like all of this kind of stuff, right? Yeah. It definitely washes away from you, and it means that I'm definitely not someone who worries about little things in life. I find it very easy to just be like, okay, Sarah. And I definitely think that having years of hiking, spending a lot of time out on my own, like doing big trails, struggling and then overcut, like is part of the reason that I really struggle to care about these kind of things.
Yeah.
As crazy as it sounds, like
such a key thing to being happy on the whole. I think being able to not make mountains out of molehills, understand and put things in perspective, and kind of prioritize in a way, I think is such an important thing. Have you got, what's the next big ambition? What's the next adventure?
Yeah, I haven't been, well, I guess it's been over a month. Like, I was without work, like I was willfully unemployed for 2 years, before doing a career change. And so at the moment, the adventure is actually trying to settle down into life a little bit and have a little bit. I've done a lot of adventures recently. I've been doing lots of interesting projects. And actually now the adventure is actually to have somewhere to live again. Like I'm building a house at the moment. Like it'd be nice to have somewhere to live. I have some great new friends that aren't just transitory. Like I've kind of like, I've got my best friends, but a lot of friends that I knew where have all moved away, and it's time. And part of the adventure is to go and make some new friends. I have to go do some interesting things, meet new people, and kind of create some new relationships. That isn't just me walking around in the hills on my own. Yeah. But then also, like, I totally want to go to Central Asia, like, and do some, and also that, and do some cool ultra running stuff. Definitely like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. I read the Silk Road book by Frank. I've forgotten his surname. Same. And I've definitely been inspired by this. Part of me going to Armenia was to have a little bit of a flavor of the kind of Caucasus and the Silk Road. And I think that's what really excites me. I guess a lot of people are talking about hiking in the US and Canada, and I think that they're beautiful places, but I feel like there's this kind of untouched wealth of like hiking opportunities out in Central Asia that hasn't really got the number of people that the PCT has at the moment. Maybe it will one day, but it feels more like the frontier, or like I would love to go to places like Afghanistan if the situation changed. Like the Afghan Pakistani Himalayas are really calling to me.
Wow. That is niche. Yeah.
But I haven't quite got the gall to go and try that yet, but it's definitely high on the list.
Is there an appeal to it not being kind of a sort of, if you do the PCT, it's a trail that thousands of people do every year. Is there an appeal to the sort of nicheness of it?
I guess it's multifaceted, right? So I recently did the Tiaradora, which is this kind of long distance trail of New Zealand. And it's a beautiful trail, despite what people say.
Really?
Everyone says New Zealand is beautiful, and it turns out it is. Like I'm only here to confirm that it's a beautiful place. But it's a trail that's getting more and more popular, and with that comes like logistics issues, and like you're fighting for camping spots, and like. But it also comes with a lot of benefits, right? There's always someone to talk to at the end of the day, pretty much, and you meet some really interesting people. So if you want to go and have like a very social, do some beautiful hiking and have a social interaction, then the PCT and the Tiaradora are definitely great options, right? Appalachian Trail. But also with this means that a lot of these villages that they cross have a lot of transitory hikers. And so the opportunity to go and hang out with the locals is not zero. The locals definitely come and hang out, and like, you end up on some cool adventures, driving quad bikes and shooting rifles, and like weird stuff happens with like for sure. But there's definitely like a minimization of this because the novelty is over. And if anything, that kind of thing, there's too many hikers through. Like what was cool about Armenia is that trail is absolutely stunning, and almost definitely more people will do it, and it will be good for the country and good for hiking in Armenia for more people to do it. Right? I fully support more people going to do it. But also the interactions I had, playing FIFA on the phones with the kids in the mountain huts and stuff, like there will be less space for that because they can't give coffee to everyone. They can't, and they won't be bothered. The novelty will be over. And so there's a balance between the community of people hiking and this interaction with the locals. And I do like doing some of the trails and hanging out with the hikers, but my preference is to go and like, in this Hunter S. Thompson, get to the heart of the Armenian dream or something, right? As lame as it sounds. You want to go and understand what makes people tick. Yeah. And that isn't going to happen just talking to the hostel owners and the other hikers, right? You're just seeing this like sanitized like thing. And so I think that Central Asia has a lot of capacity to go and walk these nomadic walk these, centuries old trails, right? They're not ad hoc, they're these like goat herders paths and stuff through beautiful mountains, and also have this like real and see what it looks like. What does like post-Soviet Central Asia look like? What does did even kind of the Russian Empire really have any meaning out there? Or and answer these kind of interesting questions for yourself.
Yeah.
And bear witness to what is happening. Because also these places will change as well. None of this is static.
For sure.
And so there's a finite window to go and see this. And I just feel that of all the places in the, everywhere is beautiful with the right eyes. I just have this feeling that there's some stories to tell about Central Asia, and I want to be the one to see it.
Well, I look forward to them, and I know that for a few years you've had an idea for a book. The title Long Trails and Tall Tales, and I guess my final question is how much of this is about stories, is about storytelling.
For me, the whole thing is about storytelling. One of the motivations in my life is that when I'm given a bifurcation of did I choose the left path or did I choose the right path?
Yeah,
I have this kind of semi-joking idea in the back of my head of when I'm an 80-year-old man sat in a pub telling stories to teenagers, right? Which is the story they're going to be like? That never happened.
Yeah.
No way did you ever do that, right? And it's not that I want to do it for the vanity of for me it's not necessarily it's not about what other people think. It's about what I think. But what I think is fun to do is also the thing that I think these teenagers there's no way you did it.
Yeah.
And I like that kind of I want my life to have this notion of ridiculously that would only occur by some teenage boys telling you never did that. You're a lying old git.
That's where we want to get to.
And that's what I want to do. And also, but I also, the reason my book is called, the reason what I'm trying to write is called Long Trails and Tall Tales is that when I do tell my stories, it's not always my stories that I'll enjoy telling the most. Actually, part of my book, part of the book that I'm trying to write is really I go on some adventures and I'm just the observer, and really it's about me telling the stories of the people that I meet along the way. Mm-hmm. And I love that as much as I love curating this library of stories of the people you meet along the trail.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know if I can ever actually get around to finishing this. I think there's some really good material of just fantastic people just living their day-to-day lives. And maybe some of them know they're brilliant, but a lot of them don't know they're brilliant. They're just subtly brilliant, ticking along, and I love that about the world.
Well, that is a very positive note to end on. Alex, thank you very much. I think you're the closest person to this whole idea because I think we shared a similar experience of being way out there in Armenia and kind of trying to work out why a long walk gets to the heart of what our lives are and what we're doing. And so, really appreciate your time. And see you next time.